we left off in the middle of section 3 of chapter 1. So in this version, that's on page 10. And we'll start there and we'll go just about as far as it's comfortable for us to go. I'm thinking that we'll probably get through the next section. But it's just more important for us to get the information, digest it, share with each other what's going on for us with respect to it. And Timothy and I are going to offer suggestions for reading that will carry through the entire text. And you don't have to be overly concerned about getting it this time, because it'll be repeated over and over. But this early material lends itself very well to teaching a lot of techniques for close reading.
So we're going to be, there's two things. We're going to be discussing content, but we're also going to be discussing how we unveil that content,
right,
when we read.
Right.
So those two things. So did you say should we start with paragraph 6?
Paragraph 6. And I didn't make any separations in this one, so just read a whole paragraph. Or the person who's reading, feel free to interrupt yourself. Kathy will be the first reader, and when you're done, Kathy, or in the middle, or both, offer your comments, questions, how it strikes you, like that.
Or not at all.
Or not, you don't have to, yeah.
Okay.
So paragraph 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You respond to what you perceive, and as you perceive, so shall you behave. If I could only get that, you know. The golden rule asks you to undo others as you would have them do unto you. Wait a minute. The golden rule asks you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This means that the perception of both must be accurate. The golden rule is a rule for appropriate behavior. You cannot behave appropriately unless you perceive correctly. Since you and your neighbor are equal members of one family, as you perceive both, so you will do to both. You should look out from the perception of your own holiness to the holiness of others. Gosh. I have nothing to say. It's just that I think it just is beautiful.
Anyone else want to comment on those?
Only that if I got it and really got it, I wouldn't have to do anything else.
Don't we say that all the time? There's a couple of things in here that we'd like to talk about. First of all, in terms of content, it says the golden rule is the rule for appropriate behavior. The Course doesn't have any other rules for appropriate behavior. It doesn't have the 10 commandments. It's saying, if you think about others the way you want to be thought of, or the way you want God to think of you, or the way God does think of you, that's it. Then from the way you think, your behavior will flow. But we looked at, Timothy and I looked at sentence 3. This means that the perception of both must be accurate. And we said, well, what does that mean? Does it mean the perception of the person that I'm regarding has to be accurate as well as my perception? Or does it mean that my perception of myself and that other person has to be accurate? There's two ways to take that. Okay, so do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This means that the perception of both must be accurate. So here's your first technique. Form a hypothesis. Just think to yourself, well, if it means the perception of both people must be accurate in order for my behavior to be appropriate. How does that fit in with the rest of the paragraph? Or another hypothesis, it means my perception of both of us has to be accurate. I have to think of both of us as sinless and see how that works. And the second one is the one that gets played out in the rest of the paragraph. So look at how that works. Since in sentence 6, since you and your neighbor are equal members of one family, as you perceive both your neighbor and yourself, so will you do to both. So that's, do you see how that supports the second hypothesis? You should look out from the perception of your own holiness to the holiness of others. The other person doesn't have to be thinking anything in particular. So the thing is, when you see something that's like a little bit, doesn't quite fit, you might want to form a hypothesis and see how it fits with the rest of the paragraph or with the other material that's around it. Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is if when he starts to talk about being guided from the Holy Spirit, and guidance is about actions, it's about everything. But when he begins to talk about guidance from the Holy Spirit, he says, your decision is not about what should I do or what should happen. Your decision has to be about what I want. And then from what you want comes your behavior. And so in this context, it's saying, first there's the perception, and then there is whatever
Behavior.
actions or behaviors come. Whereas from the ego standpoint, all these actions and behaviors are happening, and then it wants to look to the past to see what it means. And that's just what do I want? How shall I perceive? Then everything follows from there.
Right, right. So the first sentence in 6 is, you respond to what you perceive, and as you perceive, so you shall behave. So that's the only place we have to do our correction, is at the level of perception.
Right.
How am I perceiving myself and my brother?
So am I perceiving you in a way where I can see myself as better or different? Or am I perceiving us both equal members of the sonship, equally entitled?
Right.
Regardless of your behavior or mine, we're equally entitled to
Exactly.
the miracle.
Right.
Okay.
Any comments, questions?
Well, I don't know how to mute myself. I've tried a lot of things, so I will be quiet, except if I raise my hand.
Well, no, just go right ahead and speak. Everybody, just go right ahead and speak when you want to.
Oh, well, but I'm just looking at the word respond because I'm thinking a lot lately about using the course rather than because I'm used, thinking a lot is can be helpful, but really using what it says shows you, so you don't have to worry. So, because I worry so much about how angry I am, how much in conflict I am, how as an ego, I'm used to being in conflict about life. But to respond to what you perceive, responsiveness is very present tense. It's not a thought, really. I mean, it's a choice in a sense, but it's not really thinking about something. It's just gathering yourself together to respond in the moment. It's not, I mean, I could be planning, but that's different. Planning is not, ends in a response, but responding is right now. So anyway, that's what was striking me.
Thank you. Connie, you're next.
Miracles arise from a mind that is ready for them. I'm going to read that again. Miracles arise from a mind that is ready for them. By being united, this mind goes out to everyone, even without the awareness of the miracle worker himself. The impersonal nature of miracles is because the atonement itself is one, uniting all creations with their creator. As an expression of what you truly are, the miracle places the mind in a state of grace. The mind within naturally welcomes the host within and the stranger without. When you bring in the stranger, he becomes your brother. I don't know, there's something in that paragraph that it has me thinking about how, you know, it's like Timothy says, it's what you want, but before it's even what you want, it's having myself be in a state ongoing where I'm coming from that.
Right.
I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
any sense, but
Sure, that does. Yeah.
Sure does. So I hear echoes of the miracle principles in here, that when our mind is united, in other words, we're not into a split mind, we're not thinking with both the ego and the Holy Spirit, we're not going back and forth, then our mind, when it's united, goes out to everybody without even our thinking about it or being aware of it. It's like we shine the light of God without even trying. That's good. I also wanted to point out that I like to make a note in my margin, for those of you who don't mind marking up your books. When I see things that look like a definition or something like a definition, like a synonym, something like that, I make a note like DEF for definition. And where I'm seeing that is in sentence 3, it says, the atonement itself is one, uniting all creations with their creator. Helps me to understand what the atonement is. That's just a little tip. Any other comments on that paragraph?
the other thing this paragraph says to me is this whole course is about a way of being. Living the course is just being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living in the atonement, living in that space all the time. That's the challenge.
And that really gets emphasized in 7.4 as an expression of what you truly are,
Right.
is where everything comes from. This comes from the nature of who you really are.
Yeah, right.
Right. And then it says you're awakened to the host within, which I think means the Holy Spirit.
Sure is.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the stranger, that has a pretty big biblical reference point, in that, you know, everyone we see seems to be a stranger or different or unknown to us. But when we welcome the stranger in,
Yeah.
that's how we discover our true self.
Right. That's where all creation is united.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Jesus literally says a place in the Course, I was a stranger, but you brought me in.
Uh-huh.
And that's the way to turn around. This all may seem very strange, that you can change your mind and everything changes, but that's what he's saying.
Yeah, it sure is.
Also, I like that, how the Course uses certain words throughout, like the word stranger, as you just mentioned, and the word stranger also in that big lesson, you know, the fear is the stranger here,
Mhm.
because you've let a stranger in your house. It's kind of like, I mean, the stranger is always fear, or fearful, brings fear. You think it's making you afraid or whatever.
Right.
The idea of strangeness. for and different, right? Like we're saying.
Yeah.
So when it's saying that if your miracle, oh, did I interrupt you, Poppy? I'm sorry.
No.
You're united with a miracle-minded mind, your thoughts go out to everyone, as opposed when you're not, do they still go out to everyone? Do you know what I'm trying to get at?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, if you're sitting at home hating,
Yeah.
hatred goes out. It's, you know, the
Well,
course.
he's pretty clear though, that the Holy Spirit and your true self is always, well, it remains in the truth of who you are, but miracles are always being exchanged, but it's being done by the Holy Spirit. And the only thing that's missing is our awareness of it.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's our awareness that's not making it happen. It's the Holy Spirit's and the plan of atonement that's making it happen.
So the question, I think, is if we're in a negative, conflicted state of mind, does that affect other people? I think it does.
I think it does too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least in a certain
definitely.
radius, it does.
Well, can I say something? I was just thinking there's so much in that. Like, because in the course terms, illusion and dream are synonyms.
Mhm.
This is an illusion, this is a dream. This is the egoic dream of fear, which is blindness in course terms. Fear makes blind, that we're not really seeing. I mean, in the true sense. But so in that sense, we are as long as my mind is aligned to fear, I am part of that mind. It's not my personal.
Right.
Got it.
Exactly.
I'm participating in that mind.
That was well said.
There's a part in the course where it says, everything I think or say or do is shared with all the world.
That's right.
So if it's a negative thing, you're sharing your negative stuff with all the world, aren't you? I
Yeah.
mean, ultimately, it's not really real, but from your perception, it's real.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
You know, that's why he makes such a large distinction between the realm of perception and the realm of knowledge. I mean, the whole point of knowledge is you never did separate from love or from
Mhm.
God. The whole point of knowledge is that the Holy Spirit's always working
Mhm. Mhm.
back and forth, but it's our awareness that's affected. And if
Mhm.
we're in the hateful state of mind, then that's what we're going to be aware of.
That's right.
It's our awareness isn't what's making it happen. It's what's making us aware of it.
Yeah.
God is always working,
Yeah. The only thing that's real is God and his creation.
and the plan of atonement is always working. It's just our awareness.
Right.
So if I'm in a state of love, then I'm going to be aware of all the miracles.
Yeah.
If I'm in a state of fear, I'm going to be aware of all the hate and judgments.
That's right. Yep. It's like that.
Go ahead.
State is all determined by perception.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay.
That's all.
So I'm thinking it all goes back to that last paragraph. Perception is
Yeah.
key.
Yeah, you look out from your perception, from your own holiness to the holiness of others.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he said that's how you should think of yourself, as loving and lovable,
Right.
right? Because that's who you are.
That's right. That's what we are.
That's in the last judgment. What is the last judgment? It's the only right use of judgment is how do you feel, but within that is, are you loving? The truth, the only true judgment is you are loving and lovable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
Yeah,
kind of hard.
I think we read that. I think we read that in our last class where it said a man must think of, this is how a man must think of himself in his heart because this is what he is. You are the work of God and his work is wholly lovable and wholly loving. Okay, Eric, how about you? Number 7.
8, I think.
Hey, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That the miracle may have effects on your brothers that you may not recognize is not your concern. The miracle will always bless you. Miracles you are not asked to perform have not lost their value. They are still expressions of your own state of grace, but the action aspect of the miracle should be controlled by me because of my complete awareness of the whole plan. The impersonal nature of miracle-mindedness ensures your grace, but only I am in a position to know where they can be bestowed. Wow. So what that seems to be saying to me is that you ask for a miracle, you ask to extend love to a situation or a person, and it might not be you that gets told to do something. You've given it to the Holy Spirit and you said, please heal this situation, please show me it in a true light, and then you don't do anything until you're prompted to, and you might not be prompted to. That somebody else might be prompted to bring that healing in, or it might seem that nothing happens. But the miracle is guaranteed regardless because you've asked the Holy Spirit.
That's beautiful.
That's a really great way to say there. Yeah. So one of the reading techniques is like following concepts as they develop. So in that last paragraph, 7.3, it said the impersonal nature of miracles. And here it's using the same term in 8.3, the impersonal nature. But what does it mean to say the impersonal nature of miracles? They're interpersonal, meaning they're offered between people. But what does it mean to say it's impersonal?
Well, impersonal means,
Let them answer.
oh, okay.
Well, I'll say something just off the cuff is impersonal implies I wouldn't have a position to defend. I mean, when I'm personal, I think who I am in my separated individuality and what I need to protect in that term, in those terms. So that's why impersonal is very liberating, along with, and the equation of the impersonal nature with your grace, which is given you, which is your identity in God. Anyway.
Anybody else on the impersonal? Well, the way I read impersonal is that it applies to every situation.
Right.
It's transcendent of that personal context, in that miracles are always applicable. In other words,
Always, yes.
if you're behaving extremely bad, like you're trying to kill me or something.
Yeah,
like
that happens every week.
Yeah, but what it means is that every situation can be, a miracle can be applied to every situation, regardless of the personal dynamics or attributes. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
I think of it as like similar to unconditional.
Yes, that's what I was going for. Without conditions, it's applied.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't judge you worthy of forgiveness because, well, you had a bad childhood or something.
Yeah.
You're entitled to forgiveness
No
regardless.
matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll read 9. Miracles are selective, so that would be not impersonal, I guess, only in the sense that they are directed toward those who can use them for themselves. This is a really interesting paragraph. Since this makes it inevitable that they will extend them to others, a strong chain of atonement is welded. However, this selectivity takes no account of the magnitude of the miracle itself, because the concept of size exists on a plane that is itself unreal. Since the miracle aims at restoring the awareness of reality, it would not be useful if it were bound by laws that govern the error it claims to correct. So I'm going to comment on the second part of this first, even though I'm most interested in the first part. So the second part is really, again, saying there's no order of difficulty in miracles. That was the first miracle principle. And that's because we think of size, importance, and all that. It's just part of the dream. Dream is a dream, an illusion's an illusion. A cartoon is a cartoon. It's not real. What really strikes me as being very practical is that miracles, and I'm taking this, at least hypothetically, as the action aspect of miracles. Miracles are selective only in the sense that they are directed toward those who can use them for themselves so that they will pass them on. This,
And also they're to those who are ready to receive.
right.
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 That's where and then therefore, since they receive,
Mm-hmm.
they will be given, because receiving is giving.
Yes, that's right. So this direction has to be under Holy Spirit or Jesus control. This, if the miracle mindedness is impersonal and goes out to everybody, there's no direction around that. But the action aspect has to be controlled by him, as he says. So he's directing these miracles, the action, the giving of whatever it is that represents love. He's directing it toward those who are ready for it and will extend it. I think of this as like the multi-level marketing plan of the atonement, right? You get the miracle, you give it to 8 others. Those 8 others, if they are ready, they give it to 8 more, and so on. It's like, it's an exponential growth. We had a student who used the most wonderful metaphor for this. It's like a wildfire. It's like you light the grass, it goes out. If you spend all your time trying to help somebody who is not ready to receive it, you're not playing the game.
And you're not going to get it back.
Well, that too,
Right?
yeah.
It's going to feel like sacrifice.
That too.
Yeah.
But, you know, we don't even have to worry about when we're ready to give miracles. The readiness is our job, that we do that by forgiving, by cleaning out our channel so that we can receive the guidance
Right.
as to how to act.
Would you say this is one of the contexts where he says readiness is not necessarily mastery, but it means that you're ready to change?
Well,
It doesn't mean you've mastered all of this. It just means you're ready for a change.
I don't see the connection with this one, but
Okay.
you do, and that's what's important. Anybody else want to make a comment about this paragraph?
Yeah.
So far?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, it's the word welded that strikes me. A strong chain of atonement is welded.
Yeah.
That chain is never coming apart, is it? It's solid, never coming apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Good point.
you know, it's not, I mean, it's very intentional when he says the concept of size exists. So size is a lot about relatedness, like
Mhm.
size can be big or it can be little, or our hurts can be big
Yeah.
or they can be little.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if, like Jesus said, I was tortured and murdered. I did not interpret that as a path.
Right.
So it's not about the size of our hurts, how little or small they are. Anyone
Mhm.
is a problem as much as a big one.
Right.
So there's that whole sense of how things seem to be relative to one thing and to another. The miracle is impersonal. It applies to every situation, not just some. So whether I'm greatly hurt or a little bit of hurt, I need to turn to miracles.
Right. Right.
I like
Go, Pop.
the last sentence a lot because of what it says, its point, but also because there's that element which I love in the text especially, is the dry, almost, I don't know if it's really there, but to me, dry humor. Since the very restoring the awareness of reality, it would not be useful if it were bound by laws that govern the error it aims to correct. Sounds, it's kind of humorous.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, right. That when you think of it, that's kind of a no-brainer, but
Yeah. Okay, so Poppy, you're next.
oh, okay. Oh, good. The escape from darkness. The escape from darkness involves two stages. First, the recognition that darkness cannot hide. This step usually entails fear. Second, the recognition that there is nothing you want to hide, even if you could. This step brings escape from fear. When you have been, there's nothing I want to hide, even if I could, and this step brings my escape from fear. When you have become willing to hide nothing, you will not only be willing to enter into communion, but will also understand joy, peace, and joy. Wow, that was for me a loaded paragraph. You go from darkness to peace and joy, which is like obvious, but it's the escape from darkness. This, I read it twice already, but the recognition that darkness cannot hide, and then the second, you have to recognize that darkness can't really hide. I'm not sure if I really grasped that, but I understand that brings up fear usually. I mean, that the thought that you can't really protect what you thought you needed to protect. But and so then I no longer want to hide, even if I think that it's true that I can hide. I don't want that experience.
I think of that darkness as what I think of as my faults, my lacks, my sins, things I just don't want people to know about. That's what I want to hide. I really loved it that you went ahead and used one of our reading techniques, which is taking the sentence and putting it in your own words.
Oh,
So did you notice how she read that? I think
with
it was sentence 5. She said, when I have become willing to hide nothing, I will not only be willing to enter into communion, but will understand peace and joy. That might have been the one you read in your own words, and maybe it wasn't, but you see how powerful that is?
It's actually sentence 3, but I mean, yeah, I get the point is the same.
Yeah.
It makes you absorb it, at least seems to make it more absorbable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a comment on sentence 3 too, that recognition that there's nothing you want to hide. So shame is really a waste of time.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah. There's several places in the Course that takes apart this psychological mind. Psychology says you're afraid to look because it's so painful to look. And what the Course is saying is that you're really afraid to look because on some level, if you do, you'll just see that there's love and forgiveness.
Right.
There is nothing else.
Right.
But we don't know there's nothing else because we're not really looking. And we pretend, well, it's very fearful to look at all the shame and guilt. And that's not what we're afraid of. We're afraid of uncovering the love.
The love that's underneath
That's
that.
underneath it, which was our original intent and separate. We're just keeping the separation from love going by not looking.
Right.
Right.
That's what we really fear, is uncovering the love.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can't say this right, but lesson 130, I always go back to the fear makes blind. is what you're describing there. And what this is describing too is that really that it's not hiding anything. It's like closing your eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Blinding yourself to what is.
Great point.
Yeah.
Really good point, Poppy.
Yeah.
Bang on.
And we're still holding on to the burden of that thing that we don't want to show. I remember hearing a very funny tape of Ram Dass where he actually said, if everything that you don't want anybody to know about were on the front page of the New York Times, you'd be free. Like, just let it out and you'll be free. I'm sorry, I missed Laura on the last reading.
So you're up on
That's
2.
okay. 2. Holiness can never be really hidden in darkness, but you can deceive yourself about it. This deception makes you fearful because you realize in your heart it is a deception, and you exert enormous effort to establish its reality. The miracle sets reality where it belongs. Reality belongs only to spirit, and the miracle acknowledges only truth. It thus dispels illusions about yourself and puts you in communion with yourself and God. The miracle joins in the atonement by placing the mind in the service of the Holy Spirit. This establishes the proper function of the mind and corrects its errors, which are merely lacks of love. Your mind can be possessed by illusions, but spirit is eternally free. If a mind perceives without love, it perceives an empty shell and is unaware of the spirit within. But the atonement restores spirit to its proper place. The mind that serves spirit is invulnerable. Well, there's a lot in there. I'm just looking at the deception,
Yeah.
the reference again to deceiving yourself about what you're trying to hide. And the enormous amount of effort, the space that it takes up in our mind to distract us from the truth of who we are.
Right.
It's exhausting. So really, any miracle just kind of reestablishes that truth of who we are, in the moment at least.
Yeah. As you're speaking about this, I'm thinking about the enormous efforts we make to establish the reality of pain, chaos, impending disaster, and all of that we're seeing in the world now, right? We take a lot of energy
Yeah.
to make ourselves believe in its reality instead of standing on our holiness and the holiness of others to allow the miracle to change things.
So he's turning completely around. Always he's turning completely around our thinking. So on one level, we're thinking I'm trying to hide the fact of how I failed as a parent or how I failed in all this. But what this is saying, what I'm trying to hide is my holiness,
Yeah,
which heals those things.
right,
And heals them right away as soon as I bring them together.
right,
So that reminds me of at the beginning of 31, where he says, don't say you can't learn miracles or this course. You've taught yourself that you're not who you think you are.
right.
You've taught yourself your thoughts are not my own. They just are produced by, don't say you can't learn this course.
Right.
You've learned this incredibly crazy world. you
Crazy
made up.
world, yeah. Very
And you-
complex,
And
crazy,
you've
and
worked
threatening.
hard at it
Yeah.
all the time to establish that shame and guilt is your reality.
Right,
And it's not.
right.
So I think what you're saying is this the great darkness before the dawn, I hope.
I think so.
Yeah. Now we can trust that, I think.
Don't forget, at the end of the manual, it says, how will the world end? And it says the world will end in joy, right? If that's the case, then we're on a path to joy. Stick with that. Stay with that and recognize that It's only, our only job is to become miracle minded and then to do what we're being asked to do. That's it. Clear out our channel through forgiveness. We're doing our best to get to the end of that rainbow at the end of the yellow brick road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot in this paragraph. Did anybody else have comments to make on it?
Well, I was going to say touched, but what speaks out to me is the whole thing about mind. This course is all about changing your mind, right? So it's correcting the wrong-mindedness of the way we live, right? The way we perceive, et cetera, et cetera. That's the challenge of life.
And I really like that last sentence in this paragraph, because he said, here's your criteria to know if you're tracking with the miracles in the atonement. I'm invulnerable,
Right.
which means nothing from the outside can take away my peace.
I love that.
You're invulnerable.
I worked with that last sentence. The mind that serves the spirit is invulnerable. I spent quite a bit of time with that one sentence. And it's like, right. If I am paying attention, if my mind is serving my body or the physical world, I'm always in a state of fear. If my mind is serving spirit, my body is an instrument. It's not the focus of my attention. I am invulnerable. I know that I am one with God and I have work to do here. The work is of the mind. If there's something to do with the body, it will be shown to me. And I'm also encouraged by the something that comes up in chapter 6, I think, I'm not sure, where it says, he's asking for teachers, not for martyrs, right? Good thing. We don't have to think that if our mind is serving the spirit, that we are going to be in trouble. That's the ego soul. Well, don't do that. You're going to be in trouble. You're going to be attacked. No, the mind that serves the spirit is invulnerable. Thank God.
So let's take a pragmatic example of that. To say, you and I, working on various things, which we do, like teaching, things like that. So if you have one idea about how something should go, and I have another idea of how something goes, that doesn't have to be a conflict. It doesn't have to be like, oh no, we're going to have this irresolvable situation because you think one way, and I know that I'm invulnerable.
Yeah.
I hold that space.
Yeah.
And however those conflicts seem to be, they'll work out.
It's not important. It's just motion. It's just action. It's just change.
Well, it doesn't seem unimportant in the moment.
It doesn't seem unimportant to ego.
Yeah, to ego mind.
Here, so sentence 9 says, if a mind perceives without love, it perceives an empty shell and is unaware of the spirit within. So that kind of jumped out at me as
Me too.
the empty shell. Yeah, it's like we see each other as bodies or situations as what can it do for me kind of thing. But it made me go back and look at similar kinds of words. So there was the empty shell, the lack of love, illusions,
Hiddenness of things.
darkness, all these words that seem to imply a nothingness. There's a whole bunch of them in there. And lack of love is later on defined as a synonym for sin.
Yeah,
So, which is really great because
that's actually
sin
in the
is
next
so
paragraph.
yucky. Okay, here it is. There it is, right there.
But notice too that he's already said to us, spirit is in a state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit.
Right.
Therefore, you in a state of grace forever. Now, I may not be aware of that, but I can take it on faith that I am the spirit and I possess the grace to realize
Mhm.
whatever I need to, whatever miracle I need to heal that situation.
Mhm.
So from the standpoint of truth, that hasn't changed, but my awareness of what needs to be healed here
Mhm.
can always be there because I am that spirit, and so are you.
Right.
He's like Jesus said, it's obvious that bodies can attack bodies,
Mhm.
but if you're spirit, what could attack you?
Right.
What could hurt you if you're spirit?
Because spirit is one. Yeah, and one with God. Any other thoughts about that paragraph?
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Connie.
Well, the sentence 11, the mind that serves the spirit is invulnerable. That lesson that says, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, it's just another way of saying that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Connie, let's have you and then Poppy.
I was just going to say, I am intrigued with the ego. So and I'm thinking of the ego comes up for me in this paragraph as well. And so I looked at the definition of an ego, and it says the ego is darkness, which there is no definition of ego, but that's so interesting. I mean, the darkness, so the escape from darkness is really escaping from your ego, which you'll never get away from, but other than being in your right mind.
We can recognize that it's just a lie that's tempting us. We can be at that point so that it's meaningless to us. That's pretty much an escape. Poppy, did you want to offer something about that paragraph?
Well, I don't know. At this point, I've had to fine tune what serving spirit means to me within also, which would also be in vulnerability. Because the egoic mind is the cycle is so tight that guilt is kind of built into redemption, in the old sense that I have guilt about my behavior. So that I have to recognize that I'm serving spirit when I release on my guilt and recognize that only my thought of guilt is what is hurting me. It's not the behavior, even though the behavior often is, in the egoic world perception sense, is representing guilt. It's supporting it, but I'm supporting the underlying foundation of guilt by being guilty about guilt.
All right. You can let go of your guilt about guilt.
I know this sounds stupid in a way, but for me, it's big. So,
I think it's such a great point because, like a lot of people in the pandemic, they say they're doing a lot of overeating. They're just at home, they don't know what to do. And I've done that. I'm sitting there and it's what I call recreational eating, which isn't exactly eating for my health. And I feel really guilty about it. I feel guilt that comes up and but this is saying to me is that solve the guilt
Right.
first, feel that guilt, and then the behavior will probably melt away or not. See, that's what I have to trust because I think I better address that behavior. I better change that behavior. And this is saying, change your mind.
Change your mind, period. And then your behavior will flow from that.
Right. That's what I find is a real challenge.
Yeah. Well, recognizing the guilt when it arises, that's the real challenge, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I think that it's also hanging on to a behavior dictates what's in your mind, and it's saying what's in your mind dictates your behavior.
Right.
So in a way, it depends on the person. Everything is very much where you are and how it's not, there's no formula, but I'm kind of corresponding with Timothy on that level that that I might, or both of what you're saying. I'm not sure. But anyway, I was going to say just that while I'm in a behavior and I know I'm feeling guilty about it, that to really what to look at is not the behavior, but that why would I be guilty, or, you know, like all that, or like, what is, you know, what is that? Why am I unhappy? Why am I not, you know, like, why? Yeah. Anyway, or I don't have to ask why, just
Right.
Right.
look at it.
Yeah, and just say, I don't want
Yeah, give it to Holy Spirit. I do not want.
it. Yeah.
And then
I think there's, oh,
go ahead, Kathy.
I think there's a place in the Course where it talks about neurotic guilt or some such phrase where you feel so guilty about something, but then you don't change your behavior about it. It's like you keep the guilt is
Yeah.
your payment for it.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
It's a payment, and so then this is not in this version of the course, but in one of the earlier edits, it talks about that, and the idea is you're paying for your bad behavior with your guilt so that you can continue with the behavior. But really, it's just an attraction to guilt.
Yeah.
Really, it's just a desire to be separate. That's
And it is in this version
Is
of
it?
what she just said, that, you know, you keep acting this out and
Oh,
acting
okay.
it out, but you don't really change
yeah,
because you're struggling with, I shouldn't be doing this behavior. I shouldn't be doing this behavior. And I mean, what I have to take on faith is the real attraction there. The real issue is the guilt I feel.
right,
And that what this is promising me is that I can be experiencing love in that situation instead of guilt.
right,
And then why would I act out something that's really not serving me?
exactly, right.
And doesn't guilt is the ego, the
Yeah.
ego that would keep me from love.
That's
So, yeah, so I don't know. I find it useful to, even though ego doesn't really, excuse me, exist, I find it easier when I'm with ego and out of love, to remind myself that it's ego and that's not what I choose. I choose love and not listen to the ego, even though it doesn't exist.
Yeah, we have to act as if it exists, because when we're in eclipse, it really feels real.
And by definition, the ego is an attack on love. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's how it came into existence. I think I'll leave love.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great discussion around that in terms of what's the relationship between what I feel in terms of guilt and all my actions. How do I put that all together in a
Mhm.
meaningful way? Really important discussion.
Yeah, and there's lots more to be said about it, too.
Yeah.
So you're on 3, huh?
Okay. Darkness is a lack of light, as sin is a lack of love. See, that's where I get this idea of the holy instant and instantaneous healing, in that if sin is not these errant behaviors, but a perception of being without love, then just like as soon as you turn on a light, the darkness is gone.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I accept forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
the guilt is gone.
Right,
It's instantaneous, just like you turn on a light, darkness gone. Turn on forgiveness, guilt is gone.
right.
It has no unique properties of its own, meaning darkness doesn't have any properties of its own. It's an example of the scarcity in which only error can proceed. Truth is always abundant. Those who perceive and acknowledge that they have everything have no needs of any kind. The purpose of the atonement is to restore everything to you, or rather, to restore it to your awareness. You were given everything when you were created, just as everyone was. Well, I said the most important part about that is that that should be my expectation. That if I'm really accepting true forgiveness, which is the impersonal nature of the applicability of miracles to every situation,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm actually accepting that, then the guilt is gone. And the guilt being the only, I mean, guilt says what you did has real effects.
That's it.
Guilt says, yes, you really separated from love. But if I can prove in this moment that I'm not separate from love because I feel forgiven, then I've just proved the separation in that moment.
There's some lines in here that you frequently reference.
Tell me.
Those who perceive and acknowledge that they have everything have no needs of any kind.
Right. So that was one of the examples of what is peace. I have no unmet needs. I'm not coming from unrealized goals. I'm at peace. I'm content.
Right. The purpose of the atonement is to restore everything to you. We talk about everything being the basis of all the stuff that we want to fill ourselves. Everything is happiness, joy, peace, contentment. When we have those things, those qualities of mind, then we have everything. Then anything that is a thing is just gravy. It's just extra. It's helpful, but it's not what's going to make us happy. Everything is
Rooted in
God.
spirit. It's
Yeah.
rooted in who I am.
Yep.
You know, that's joy is a part of reality. Peace is a part of reality. Love is that reality. And I think everything also, pragmatically speaking, is that, you know, whatever situation I'm in, the miracle is the answer, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to how shall I change this or that? The miracle is always the answer.
It's always the answer, and it's the miracle mindedness.
Yeah.
That's where it starts.
Right.
Like we have to really get clear about cause and effect. Mind is cause. Behaviors are effect. Circumstances are effect. Sickness is effect. Stop trying to change the effects. Change the cause. And the only place we can change it is in our own mind. And from there, it goes out to the whole world.
And also from that place too, that because we have that peace, we can hear guidance on
Yeah.
what should I do in that situation? Or how shall I express my energy? Because then we're clear,
Right,
we're not obscured in our thinking by guilt.
right. Yep. So I noticed in that paragraph, so this is another one of those techniques that you might want to watch. I had mentioned how in previous paragraphs there was all that lack, all the synonyms for lack, darkness, sin, lack of love, empty shell, that kind of thing. And now we're beginning to talk about everything and abundance. He also talks in paragraph 3 about scarcity, the scarcity belief. So sometimes when I notice things like that, I'll make a little, you know, like a little chart. This is just like, so like, you know, a note that means I'm not going to keep this note, but just by making it, writing it down, I see, oh yeah, he's got a structure here. He's making a comparison between thinking with ego or thinking with miracle mindedness. One is full of spirit, of abundance, of forgiveness, of miracles. The other is got a lot of pain in it.
You know, what's interesting about what you just said, which relates to the relationship between perception and behavior. So you have these ideas, and then you write them down, which is an action and a behavior to reinforce that thought. And that's exactly what all of our behaviors and actions can be.
That's right.
Is a reflection of that miracle mind.
Right.
And writing it down is one example.
Right.
So then our behaviors, our actions are reinforcing our true values,
Right.
rather than the guilt.
Yep. Yep. Actions reinforce the thinking. Yeah. So another one that I noticed was in paragraph 2, sentence 3 says, the miracle sets reality where it belongs. And then sentence 10 in that paragraph says, the atonement restores spirit to its proper place. It's like in both cases, the metaphor is the same. Now, that helps me. It may not help you. It's just another way of seeing how he's putting things together to make it more clearly defined for ourselves. So we are on 4, and that's the last paragraph of this section. And that would be Kathy.
The emptiness engendered by fear must be replaced by forgiveness. That is what the Bible means by there is no death, and why I could demonstrate that death does not exist. I came to fulfill the law by reinterpreting it. The law itself, if properly understood, offers only protection. It is those who have not yet changed their minds who brought the hellfire concept into it. I assure you that I will witness for anyone who lets me, and to whatever extent he permits it. Your witnessing demonstrates your belief, unless it strengthens it. Those who witness for me are expressing through their miracles, for they have abandoned the belief in deprivation in favor of the abundance they have learned belongs to them. That the law itself, if properly understood, offers only protection. Sometimes I'm just blown out of the water how loving the Course is. You know, it's like any fragments of fear that I associate with some of these salvation words, you know, is my interpretation, not the way it really is. And I just find that so comforting.
Right on.
Does anybody have a comment about how sentence 1 and 2 relate? The emptiness engendered by fear must be replaced by forgiveness. That is what the Bible means by there is no death. What's the connection? Any ideas? Any hypotheses? It's pretty, yeah.
What is the law he's reinterpreting?
Well, let's stick with this one first
All right.
before we go on.
Okay.
I just want to say I was tempted to go back to the notes on this one to see what does it say when there's like lots of talk around it. And then I thought, no, we need to stick with this version because it is sufficient. And that other version, while it has a lot to offer in terms of scholarship, it's not what I want to be teaching. I don't want to be teaching you that you got to go to some other version to get it. So if we could form a hypothesis about it, then we could test that out. And it may not show up until the next paragraph or two, which we're not going to get to today. So I'll just throw one out. The emptiness engendered by fear, so he's been talking about that, right? Must be replaced by forgiveness, or emptiness and forgiveness. That's what the Bible means by there is no death. Death is an emptiness, as it's usually considered. But there is no death. The abundance of spirit fills everything. Now that's one hypothesis that I could make when I have a question about this. You may have another one, and you may want to write it down and test it out and see how it works as you read the course. Anybody have any other ideas about that one?
For me, it links in with sentence 9 of paragraph 2, which personally speaks to me. It says, if a mind perceives without love, it perceives an empty shell and is unaware of the spirit within. So that's really my experience, that I was perceiving without love. I felt really selfish, like an empty shell, completely like suicidal and like death, like it's saying on here, because I didn't feel any spirit within. So now it's saying, but what the Bible means by there is no death, because the emptiness engendered by fear is replaced. So it's like saying there is a spirit within, and therefore this feeling of death, of emptiness, of lack can be, it's like Timothy was saying, you turn on the forgiveness and the fear is gone.
Mm,
That's beautiful, Eric.
yeah.
So what you just did was what I was suggesting in terms of testing a hypothesis. Where do you see support for that hypothesis in the course? And you went right to the sentence that pretty much says the same thing.
Mm.
Well, thank you. That was really beautiful. Anyone else on that one?
Well, what Eric said was a really good way of saying what I kind of would, but it's really, he said it so well. I don't know if I need to say anything except for that course talks a lot about forgiveness as an overlooking. So in the sense you have to overlook your body identification, that you feel that you're protecting your body in some way by, I mean, your idea of yourself is that I'm a body and this other person is doing something that threatens my survival in the ultimate sense, but in the immediate sense, like right now, you know, it threatens my sense of happiness as a body. So, but overlooking that would be forgiveness. So, well, that would mean I'm saying to myself, I'm not really a body, and there isn't really death in that case if I'm not really a body. So anyway, but I thought he said it really well, and I don't really need to say that.
Well, that was good. Thank you. So I'm very much grateful that those who have not yet changed their minds have brought the hellfire concept into the law, whatever that is. And it's like, good. He's telling us hellfire is not part of this course.
Right. So, you know, when I read that, I sort of read it as, am I going to give witness to separation from love, experiencing guilt as because I'm separate from love, or am I going to give witness to the miracle that heals that sense of scarcity?
Yeah.
Which am I going to give witness to?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And he says, I will demonstrate, I will witness to you wherever you allow me to do that. And that, but that reminds me of where he says, in very, you know, live as though I did not die,
Right.
live as though I live within you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now I'm giving witness to the atonement, to miracles,
Mhm.
to the fullness of forgiveness and love,
Mhm.
not the lack.
Right.
Because death would be the ultimate emptiness.
Yeah, if it existed.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what the ego uses death for. Like, don't worry about it, it'll all be over in death, and you know, then it'll be fine.
It'll be all erased at that point.
Yeah, at that
Yeah,
point.
right.
It's like, no, death's not gonna work that way.
Yeah, right. You know what else I loved in this paragraph is 6. The idea that we are in charge. I mean, sentence 6. I assure you that I will witness for anyone who lets me, and to whatever extent he permits it. It's like Jesus is not going to take over our minds unless we permit him to guide us.
Right.
It's like, this is not another form of imprisonment. This is a form of freedom.
Yeah.
And we are in charge. We can say how much we want to be taken care of, how much we want to be guided and led.
You know, it might be worth mentioning here where Helen kept struggling with fear.
Yeah.
And asking, you know, Jesus saying, I'm scared of you, I'm scared of this whole process, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was simply saying that I can't take away your fear as long as you want it.
Yeah, right.
And that's why it's up to you to see what are the values you're actualizing.
Right. So any last thoughts before we close today? Thank you so much
Would
for
you like
joining
to,
with us in this line by line study. It's really of value to us. And we hope it is to you and to everyone who hopefully for years to come watches on YouTube with us.
so can we end in a moment of prayer together?
Let's do it.
If we just take a quiet moment now and be in touch with our gratitude for all the things that have helped us in our spiritual life, all the people, all the teachings. Let's hold that thankfulness in our mind for all the help we've given. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Bless you all.